All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I have a trip to announce. The Secretary General will leave New York on Monday for a visit to Havana, Cuba, where he will address the opening of the 37th session of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. During his visit, the Secretary General will meet with the President of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, and other senior officials. The Secretary General will be back in New York on Tuesday evening. And the Secretary General is about to leave the United Kingdom now on his way back to New York. He wrapped up the session of the Chief Executives Board earlier today. We issued a note to correspondents concerning the CEB's work on sexual harassment just now. And while he was in London today, the Secretary General also visited the staff of the International Maritime Organization and thanked them for their valuable work. You will have seen that earlier today we announced the Secretary General's decision to appoint Susan D. Page of the United States of America as a special advisor on rule of law, global focal point review implementation. As special advisor, Ms. Page will support the implementation of recommendations from the review of the global focal point for police, justice, and corrections area in the rule of law in post-conflict and other crisis situations. Established in 2012, the global focal point arrangement ensures a coordinated and coherent UN response to country-level requests for support in the rule of law sector. Ms. Page has had a distinguished career in the UN as well as with the U.S. State Department. Most recently, she served as Special Representative of the Secretary General in Haiti, where she started up the UN Mission for Justice Support in Haiti. More is available in her bio note in our office. And I have another appointment. Today, the Secretary General is also announcing the appointment of JOSÉ VIEGAS FILHO of Brazil as his new Special Representative for Guinea-Bissau and head of the UN Integrated Peacebuilding Office in Guinea-Bissau, UNIOGBIS. Mr. FILHO succeeds Modibo Touré of Mali, who will complete his assignment on the 6th of May, 2018. The Secretary General is grateful for Mr. Touré's leadership and for the accomplishments of the mission. Mr. FILHO brings over 4 decades of experience in government service and diplomacy. His most recent assignment was as Ambassador of Brazil to Italy from 2009 to 2012. A detailed biography is available. In Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, the first monsoon rains have been affecting the hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees there. The UN Refugee Agency is rushing additional aid to Bangladesh, including 1,400 tents, the first batch of 10,000 tents that will be airlifted by the end of May. The aim is for the tents to provide emergency shelter for an estimated 60,000 refugees currently residing in areas at high risk of landslides and flooding. The government has recently allocated new land for refugees to settle on. The UN Refugee Agency, the International Organization for Migration, and World Food Program engineers are working around the clock to flatten the land to accommodate those at greatest risk. And our colleagues at the Food and Agriculture Organization also reiterated today the need for funds aimed at protecting and restoring the livelihoods of vulnerable populations, mitigating social tension, and carrying out longer-term environmental recovery and agricultural production efforts around Cox's Bazar. Jan Egeland, the special advisor to the senior advisor to the special envoy for Syria, told reporters in Geneva yesterday that there had been a marked decrease in the number of besieged and hard-to-reach people in that country. A year ago, he said there were 4.6 million people living in hard-to-reach areas and 625,000 people living in besieged areas. Today, following the recent fighting, 2 million people live in hard-to-reach areas, while 11,000 people live in besieged locations. Mr. Egeland said that the battle for Eastern Ghouta, which was the last large besieged area, is over, with tens of thousands of people having left Eastern Ghouta for Idlib. There are reports that many people may be leaving Yarmouk and Yalda and the areas south of Damascus for Idlib. Idlib, he warned, is already filled to the brim of internally displaced civilians in often desperate conditions, with more people on the way. His remarks are online. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that heavy rainfall in Kenya has caused severe flooding in at least 32 counties out of 47 across the country. An estimated 100 people have lost their lives and 260,000 others have been displaced. The increased risk of disease outbreaks is a serious concern, as flooding has compounded an ongoing cholera outbreak and a chikungunya epidemic. Floods and heavy rain have damaged infrastructure, preventing or limiting humanitarian access to many of the affected areas, and cutting off people's access to markets in multiple locations. Education and health facilities have also been impacted, with at least 29 schools and 33 health facilities inaccessible. Extensive damages and losses have been reported to agricultural fields and livestock, with over 21,000 acres of farmland destroyed and more than 19,000 livestock losses reported. The UN Refugee Agency is reiterating its call on the Rwandan authorities and Congolese refugees in Rwanda for restraint and calm after recent clashes left one refugee dead and others injured at the Kiziba refugee camp in western Rwanda. The full circumstances surrounding this incident are still unclear, but UNHCR is urging police and refugees to avoid any further confrontation and to peacefully resolve issues. Over 17,000 Congolese refugees live in the camp. Many have been there for more than 2 decades, while a significant number were born there. Faced with dwindling assistance levels and food ration reductions as humanitarian funding levels have remained chronically low, residents began protests in February. UNHCR's 2018 funding appeal for $98.8 million to support refugees in Rwanda is only 13% funded. Today, the UN Migration Agency reported that more than 10,000 migrants returned voluntarily and safely to their home countries from Greece between June 2016 and April 2018, with nearly 25,000 eligible migrants receiving targeted reintegration support. More than 80% of the refugees came from Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Georgia, and Algeria. 8,375 were men, 2,125 were women, and special assistance was provided to 77 unaccompanied migrant children, helping them to reunite with their families. More details on this can be found on IOM's website. And the Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Bintu Keita, will travel to Ljubljana, Slovenia from the 6th to 8th of May to attend the UN Kosovo Trust Building Forum organized by the UN Mission in Kosovo, jointly with the UN Kosovo team and international partners. She will also meet with Slovenian officials on the margins of the forum. Ms. Keita will then visit Cyprus from the 9th to the 11th of May, where she will review with the UN Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus ongoing progress in the implementation of the recommendations of the Security Council mandated review of the mission. During her visit to Cyprus, Ms. Keita will meet with United Nations officials, as well as relevant stakeholders on both sides of the island, representatives of the diplomatic community, and civil society. And that is it for me. Yes, Masood.
Thank you, Farhan. Farhan, I'd like to know about these reports coming out again and again about the United States armies or United States agents, army agents in Yemen, and that they have been also being part of the whole strike force inside Yemen. Is that something that you can verify?
No, we don't have any first-hand information, although we're aware of the reports. Obviously, we encourage all countries to take steps to demilitarize the area in Yemen, and we're working on efforts through our special envoy, Martin Griffiths, to bring the parties back to the negotiating table. We want to have the right atmosphere, so we want countries to lower their support for any military efforts inside the country. Yes, Farhan.
Farhan, I want to follow up on the censorship of UN Alliance for Civilization yesterday. They issued a statement saying, basically acknowledging that they had had an issue with the video being what they called unbalanced and asking names of certain countries to be omitted from the video, which amounts to censorship. The News Literacy Project, as you know, issued a second statement detailing the communication between them. In light of this new information, I'd like to know what the position of the Secretary General is of a UN agency attempting to censor media and ask that references to certain countries be deleted, and whether you think, is there an investigation? Will they face any repercussions? And if not, what kind of a message then would it send?
Regarding the Secretary General's views, yes, he was made aware of this incident that occurred yesterday at World Press Freedom Day. He believes that it is regrettable. The Secretary General had no, and his team had no prior knowledge of the postponement of this event or of this particular controversy. We are, of course, aware of it now, and we want to make it clear that the United Nations and indeed UN bodies on the whole should not restrict the freedom of expression of journalists. When journalists appear in our forums, they should be free to express their views without obstruction.
Right. But so one UN agency has engaged.
Well, this is.
So one UN agency has engaged in censorship.
It's
so
not
what does that mean? Does that mean that the Secretary General regrets it and then, business as usual? Or does it mean that they face consequences?
Well, we've made clear the need for groups, including the Alliance of Civilizations, to allow freedom of expression. I have been in dialogue with Nihal Saad, who has said that they are trying to set up a time for a new event, and they would encourage journalists, the journalists participating, to speak. And she had said, at least in what she had said to me, that they would be free to say whatever they chose.
That's the point. Now, if they reschedule is not really the point. The point is they engage in censorship. What consequences a UN agency face if it's engaged in
Well,
censorship? If the answer, you're saying, it sounds to me like you're saying they face no consequences. So if that's the case, then do you think that sends the message that that UN agencies can get away with this and that the SG will look the other way?
He's not looking the other way. Like I said, he was not apprised of it, and he does regret this. At the same time, it is not a UN agency. This is an initiative. Well, it includes people who are Secretariat staff. The High Representative and the people behind the initiative are essentially independent of the United Nations. This has been since the start, when it was founded in 2005 under Kofi Annan, but it was co-convened at that point by the leaders of Spain and Turkey. After that, you had José Sampaio of Portugal as the head, and now you have Mr. Nasser. They have a degree of operational independence. But yes, you're right that there are Secretariat staff who work as part of the Secretariat of this body. But the leadership is distinct, but we have conveyed the message to them about what needs to be done.
And what is that? What needs to be done?
That they need not to hinder the expression of journalists.
Have you asked for an apology? A statement of apology?
It's not my position to do that.
SG
I
wants
mean,
the Secretary.
I believe that Nihal has made clear that she will engage in dialogue with reporters on this, and I would certainly refer you over to her. I believe that she is in principle willing to give you a venue to say what you unfortunately were denied the opportunity to say yesterday.
I think the news literacy program has said that they will not participate in any event that they host, and as would have been panelist, neither would I, and I don't think the other panelists would either.
That's your position, and your right to exercise. Yes.
A follow-up question to that. As was just stated, the reason was clearly censorship, and the question that she gave was, will there be any consequence? So just in a simple yes or no response, will they face any repercussions for an act of admitted censorship by a UN-affiliated body?
Well, again, they have a leadership that's independent of us. So that's up to them to resolve, and I would urge you to take your question to them. And I would refer you to their press releases, but they will continue to be in contact with you.
So that would be no, that would be no, correct?
No,
they will not.
No, I've told you the Secretary General's view. He was only recently informed of this, but that's as much as I have to say on his position for now.
On
Yes.
the same subject, I remember very well that when Mr. Nasser Abdelaziz Nasser was the president of the General Assembly, he practiced censorship against the Syrian delegation on two separate occasions by asking the television not to report that same thing. So it's not a first precedent. He has a legacy of censorship. And how can a person like that be in charge of such an organization, of a part of agency?
I have no comment on his actions as the President of the General Assembly, which is outside my purview. Yes.
Sure, I wanted to add, because after your briefing yesterday, Brendan said, it's an initiative of the Secretary General. And I guess I'm just trying to understand, what are the minimum standards for such an entity to use the UN name? Like, it was initially very much associated with Spain and Turkey, and as it turns out, it's essentially censored for Turkey, Egypt, and others. Is there some, how many of these entities are there in the UN system where basically a small number of states create an entity, put UN in their name, but apparently have no accountability at all to either the Secretary General or the General Assembly or anyone else? What does the Secretary General think of entities with UN in the name, in fact, according to you at least, not having any reporting responsibility to him, but spending public money?
We believe, and I want to make it clear here, that all entities that are part of the UN family uphold the values of the United Nations. In this case, that would mean allowing reporters to go about their work and to express their views without hindrance.
Would that also, would allowing without hindrance also involve not suing reporters, such as FAO and WIPO have done?
Matthew, as I made clear yesterday, you would have to talk to them about the reasoning behind their actions,
Right.
but they have the same legal rights as any other.
Right, but I'm trying to understand the
agencies and
difference in your
institutions.
approach to these three entities. One entity can sue a journalist for criminal defamation, and there's no response by your office. There's no inquiry by your office. You say, go and ask them. In this case, to your credit, you're saying he's concerned.
They have the same legal rights as any individuals and any organizations. If those were used in a way to chill reporting, that would be a different matter. But there are cases where individuals or organizations may believe that they have been defamed.
Isn't suing for criminal defamation by definition? I believe that David Kay and other UN experts have said, by definition, it's censorship because it's an attempt to criminalize speech or reporting.
There are particular facets of different cases, and I would urge you to deal with those organizations on how they're going about those cases. Yes, please. No, her first. She hasn't
Thanks.
had a chance.
Do you have more details about the Guterres visit in Havana, please?
That's as much as I have for right now. He will participate. Like I said, there's a meeting of ECLAC, the Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean. There will be a number of leaders in the region, and he may have bilateral meetings with them. But we'll try to provide readouts of those. But it will be his first meeting with the new Cuban president. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Farhan. I am asking you about this continuous clashes between the Israelis and the Palestinians at the border, especially on a Friday. Every Friday, it has become like a ritual. Every Friday, the Palestinians are protesting at the border, and they are being attacked by the Israeli defense forces. Some are killed. When this is going to erupt into a bigger crisis, obviously. So has the Secretary General had any conversation with the Israeli authorities or the Palestinians about this situation?
The Secretary General and his envoy, Nikolai Mladenov, have been in touch at various levels with officials. And you've seen our concerns expressed about the violence. We want there to be restraint on the side of all concerned, including of the security forces. And we want all sides to take particular effort to make sure that civilians and particularly children are not put in harm's way. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Yesterday, Mr. Egeland, when he was asked about the white helmets, he said they are brave, but they work only on one side. Is it correct to say that they work only where there's a Nusra front, as has been the case in Aleppo, in Khan Sheikhoun, and in Douma?
They work in areas where they have the ability and the access to work.
Which coincides to be in a Nusra front areas.
Ultimately, we try to give them access to work in as many places as they can. But the question is, where can they go about their work and get access to the civilian population?
Well, staying on that, there's ample evidence that they have fabricated videos about alleged chemical weapons. And the witnesses who testified in Damascus and in Hague said that white helmets were involved in that, and they were giving dates and biscuits for those who are participating in those videos. Is the United Nations going to investigate anything about that?
I have no confirmation of what you're saying right now.
But
Yeah.
the investigation in Hague is going on about this, and witnesses came out and said that.
Regarding the question of chemical weapons and the work being done by our colleagues in the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, what I can point out is that the OPCW has said that the initial deployment of the fact-finding mission is complete. Samples were brought to the OPCW laboratory, where they will be split and then dispatched to the OPCW designated laboratories. The analysis of the samples may take at least 3 to 4 weeks. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, in regards to the UNESCO World Freedom Day ad, noticeably Fox News, which is obviously the #1 cable news outlet in the US, was left off. Any reason why that happened?
UNESCO writes and places it as it sees fit. You can ask them about how they handle their communications.
Their response was that they didn't have enough time to, in the time they had to produce the advert, they didn't have enough time to reach out to us and others.
Then that's their explanation.
Is that just more kind of feeling of anti-Fox feeling at the UN?
There's no anti-Fox feeling at the UN. We work quite well with Fox. Look at you and I talking right now. Yes.
Sure, some other things, but let's stay on this censorship theme. In Burundi, the government has announced in the run-up to the referendum on May 17th that 2 international media are banned for 6 months. Another one's been issued a warning, and local media has also been warning. And I haven't seen any response. I mean, this has now gone out all over. It's a written order. Where is Mr. Kafando, or who's dealing with Burundi for the UN, given that the referendum's on the 17th and now reporting about it has been banned?
Well, regarding that, we would be concerned about any efforts to constrain the rights of media in Burundi to go about their activity, particularly in this phase right before the referendum.
Right, but you would, or are you concerned, because it's been ordered?
Yeah,
The order is already
yes.
in place.
Yes, of course. We're concerned about any hindrance of the free media in Burundi.
And I want to ask you about Susan Page. Just in seeing the announcement, I'd asked, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, whether she was PNG, persona non grata. There was a big controversy with Haiti when she mentioned Petrocaribe, and I saw her at IPI just in the last week. Was it always the intention when she began in November that she would leave by May, or is this a result of pushback by the government of Haiti, and what's the process to replace her?
No, well, she was not. She was not rendered persona non grata. She has this new position, and we are actively working on finding a new head of the MINUJUST mission in Haiti.
With all due respect to her, given that the issues around the mission in Haiti involve, for example, many people feeling that the failure to provide individual restitution to people injured by the cholera that's largely attributed to the UN having brought, does rule of law, does it strike you that it might be ironic to take the head of the mission in Haiti and give them this rule of law post? Does the UN's non-payment of recompense and accountability to those injured by cholera comply with the idea of rule of law?
We've already expressed what we're doing in terms of trying to deal with the cholera epidemic in Haiti, and that's an issue separate and apart from the tasks that she has had. Yes, Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. As a follow-up on the Alliance of Civilizations, does the Secretary General have any plans to write to the head of the Alliance of Civilizations to put forward the United Nations views on total opposition to censorship of the media?
I'm not aware of any of what further steps might be contemplated at this stage. Yes.
Yeah, going back to the issue of chemical weapons. I mean, here, most of the attacks, alleged attacks on chemical weapons happened in areas controlled by al-Nusra, and coincidentally, white helmets were available there to take pictures. So is that worth, does the Secretary General believe that this is worth looking into and investigating whether this could be a false flag operation?
Well, the Secretary General has made very clear the need for an accountability mechanism to deal with chemical weapons in Syria. As you know, we had the Joint Investigative Mechanism, whose mandate was not renewed, and he has since then repeatedly called for there to be some form of an accountability mechanism. In lieu of that, all we can do at this stage is the sort of fact-finding work that's being carried out by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons.
Given that Mr. England yesterday confirmed that they only work on one side, white helmets, isn't that suspicious that they are not like any other humanitarian organization working?
Like I said, they work where they can get access. Yes.
Yes, Farhan, about maybe you have answered this question yesterday or earlier today, but the thing is about this FAO meeting, FAO visit into North Korea taking place today. Is that something that you talked about, or is that something that you know about? Food and Agriculture Authority visiting North Korea.
I'm not aware of any visit by the Food and Agriculture Organization to North Korea.
That's
They haven't made any announcement about
No,
that.
sorry.
To,
Yeah, North Korea.
to the Democratic
You
People's
have no
Republic of Korea.
information
I'm not aware of any FAO visit there.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about that video of Austrian peacekeepers in Undorf. There's been now an acknowledgement in Austria that this video didn't just emerge now, that it was used by the Austrian military as a training video, i.e. they knew all about it. And there's an editorial in Austria saying, quote, questions need to be addressed to the commander of the UN mission, as well as to the top floors of the United Nations in New York. What does the Secretary General think? When it first came out, it seemed like it had been a lost video and that the questions were really simply for Austria to address. But given that the peacekeepers wearing UN helmets and under UN control are described by people that have seen the video as essentially either sending these Syrian police to their death or laughing as they were killed, what's the response by the UN?
We are aware that Austria is looking into this, and we'll provide whatever support we can to their own inquiry. If there's any further steps to be announced from our end, we'll let you know.
But
at
you
that
disagree
point.
that there's questions, as the press there is saying, that it's not simply an Austrian thing, given that they were under UN control when this occurred.
Well, they were UN peacekeepers. Right now, like I said, Austria is looking into it, and we're going to support that. If there's any further steps to be announced from our end, we'll let you know at that point. Yes.
But it seems that whatever happens in that area, the Filipinos were kidnapped by Al-Nusra Front then. And it seems the United Nations is indifferent about what happens to the people who are controlling the area, and to the presence of Al-Nusra in that area, even until today.
No, nothing could be further from the truth. We're concerned about the activities by all of the armed groups in Syria.
Was anyone who helped the Al-Nusra Front to kidnap and then to rescue them through Jordan and Israel, was there anybody brought to accountability how they helped them?
There's a general problem of accountability throughout Syria, which is what we've been asking for, not just about chemical weapons, but throughout the actions by all the parties to the conflict. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Can I ask you about Cyprus?
Okay. Sure, why not?
A spokesperson for the Turkish Foreign Ministry, Hami Aksoy, has said, quote, it is not possible to reach a federal solution with the Greek Cypriots mindset. We believe it is time to try a new way. So this is setting off waves saying that essentially that Turkey is saying that the former framework for dealing with this may be thrown out the window. Is there a response from the UN? And people there continue to say that Jane Hall-Lute is this temporary envoy. Is that something that you continue to deny?
There's nothing to announce about any visits, and like I said a few days ago, there's certainly no appointment of a special envoy to announce. Regarding these quotes, we're not going to respond to all of the rhetoric from different officials, but what we have made clear is the need for the parties to come back to the table, and we're trying to see what can be done to bring them back. Have a good weekend, everyone.